is the ghost with the most? Is it you, Gregory? Welcome back, my fellow gamers, to another FNAF Security Breach Theory video. Today we'll be talking about everyone's favorite security breach character because, well, we all play as him, Gregory. Okay, so admittedly, Glamrock Freddy is my favorite character, and then probably Glamrock Chica, and then Vanny, then Gregory, but he ranks in the top at least because he is the protagonist, and that's just how that cookie crumbles. But speaking of cookies, can you eat them if you're a ghost? Perhaps not. Part of the reason why I was initially suspicious of Gregory being a ghost was his very mysterious origin. The Pizzaplex seems to have no records of him and is unable to locate his parents or even any trace of him in the system, implying he somehow, I guess, snuck into the Pizzaplex, or perhaps he is a victim that never left. I know we get that ending where Gregory is sleeping in the streets homeless, but don't worry, I'll be talking about that too and how I think that could actually play into my theory of Gregory being a ghost and possibly a victim of villainous and murderous animatronics. But more on that later. Getting back to those cookies, let's talk about them. Can you eat cookies or drink drinks if you're dead? Well, I personally do not think you can. The drinks and food wouldn't be able to be processed by your ghostly form, so it really wouldn't make sense for you to be able to. We've all seen what happens when someone like Slimer from Ghostbuster eats food. It kind of just goes right through him, and if anything, it turns into like slime or ectoplasm. You can't really like process it properly. It's pretty gross. Now, Gregory never seems to be compelled to eat, so we don't know for sure, but it also seems odd that you would be collecting so many tasty and limited edition drinks and food items without being able to eat them, which in this game, for some reason, you just can't do that. It's especially weird actually because when you play in Help Wanted, you can eat things, and that's like a VR game, so I don't understand how that all works. And throughout the course of the evening, Gregory doesn't even express that he is hungry, and that is a long time and a lot of running around to do and not to be hungry from. If you're alive, that is. Which, like I said, I really think this is more evidence that Gregory may no longer be considered as such. Spirits don't really have a need to get hungry as they don't have proper bods, so they don't need to like fuel them. They're just ghosty ghosts. They don't have physical forms, you know? Aside from not being able to eat, you also don't seem to feel much of any normal human pains. Gregory gets tired periodically from prolonged running and crawling in terms of his stamina bar, but he doesn't actually express getting tired in terms of like being sleepy. He's never like, oh my gosh, I'm like so tired. Okay, so like maybe when Moondrop is coming around trying to make you sleepy, but I don't know, that's some weird stuff. That's a thing that every time I talk about it, I'm like, I don't even know if this should be in this game. Considering how late Gregory is staying up for a normal human child, it's pretty odd that he doesn't ever express being like tired from staying up too late. Of course, if you're a robot, then the normal everyday pains experienced in human life wouldn't affect you. You don't need to sleep, so why would you get tired? Which, you know, he could also be an animatronic. Sure, we see him trying to sleep in an alley in one of the endings, but we don't actually hear him express feeling tired or ever see him fully asleep. So I'm thinking either animatronic or ghosty ghost. Take your pick. We're focusing on ghosts though in this theory, so let's get back to that. Right at the beginning of this game, I was pretty suspicious of Gregory when it came to him being a real living kid. Something was weird about him. He just, I don't know, there's something off about Gregory. I just look at him and I'm like, I don't know, what's up with you? Are you real? Are you a real boy? Right at the beginning, he generally just seemed to be too big to actually fit into Freddy's stomach cavity. Especially when you learn, at least initially, there was also a Fazwatch dispenser in there somehow. I know these stomachs are in theory possibly based off of Williams' designs, which were about capturing kids, or at least seemed to be from his sinister perspective. But in this game, even Glamrock Freddy seems to think Gregory moving around inside of him is dangerous, as that is an area that is really only meant to be large enough for moving things like birthday cakes and piñatas. I imagine even the piñatas would actually have to be really small though, because that cavity does not look big enough for a piñata to me. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever seen a birthday cake for a kid's party that was large enough to be considered the size of a small child. Like, how big would that cake have to be for this to work? Like, he'd have to be carrying around giant cakes in his stomach. Also, am I just not eating large enough cakes? Is that what is happening here? Am I missing out? Are people giving me tiny little like dinky cakes for my birthday? If that's the reality though, if I'm not just like getting tiny cakes and people are ripping me off on my birthday, I'm gonna be real sad. Even when I make cakes though, I don't make them that big. Let me know your thoughts about cake sizes down in the comments below, and let me know how big the biggest birthday cake you've ever seen or made in person was. Maybe there's something I'm missing out out on here. Maybe I'm just not making or eating large enough cakes. Sweet, ginormous birthday cakes. Where are you? Another thing that seems odd is you never really wear the clothes that you collect. At least not as far as we can tell or see. Now they might increase your stats to just have them like in your inventory, but as far as we know, Gregory never puts those items on. Is this because he always has to remain in the outfit that he died in? Because, you know, he's a freaking ghost? Perhaps the only clothes he can wear are the ones he's already wearing. And I know what you're thinking, okay, but then what about the Faz Watch? Well, the Faz Watch could still be an item that Gregory could have equipped because it doesn't actually interfere with the ethereal clothes that he's already wearing. After all, the Faz Watch is more of an accessory really than like an outfit choice. Also, if my theory is right and he is a spooktacular spirit, it's also very likely that he's like a poltergeist who can interact with and hold objects in the real world, like the flashlight, the laser blaster, his Faz Watch, and other such items that he is able to use. Though even then, you don't typically see poltergeists put on physical clothing for some reason. Ghosts might be able to change their appearance, but usually not by physically dressing up. Like a sheet. I think that's the most I've ever seen ghosts wear. I feel like in Beetlejuice they wear sheets at one point, right? They're trying to scare everybody. But that's one piece. I feel like if you were to like have pants and like a shirt and shoes and socks and all that stuff, that's like a lot of clothing for you to have to like maintain a physical form to wear it. So I think it's just too much work for a ghost? I don't know. I would propose when it came to Gregory being a ghost at the Pizzaplex that he was a victim who went missing there. Perhaps that's why there are no records of him, because Afton had them wiped clean. I imagine he would find a way to do that for all of his victims here so that he could preserve his hunting ground. It also seems odd that Gregory has no relatives to speak of. The game leads us to believe this is because Gregory is homeless and even possibly suggests that he or someone at least may have been living in the Pizzaplex prior to the events of Security Breach, with hidden alcoves where it looks like someone has been kind of like squatting and living. And with one of the endings showing Gregory living in a gutter, huddling under a newspaper for warmth. Is it also possible that Gregory would always be cold if he was a ghost? So could his seeking warmth in that ending also be a hint that he's no longer of this world? That might be a bit of a stretch, but it's still something to consider at least. I mean, ghosts are usually very cold. That's, you know, they say when a ghost passes through you feel like a chill. So I'm just saying it could be a connection. I know I'm stretching, but just come with me on this ghostly journey. Please, come with me. It'll be fun. Despite the fact that Security Breach seems to want us to think that Gregory is homeless, it's also possible that he simply can't remember his home. After all, for being homeless, he looks relatively well kept and well dressed. And who gave him that band-aid on his cheek, or where did he get it from if he doesn't have literally anyone around to look after him? Did he run away from home? Or is it that Gregory no longer remembers his home because his life was taken from him during a visit to the Pizzaplex and now he basically haunts it, his soul trapped due to his unsolved murder and the traumatic nature of his death? Perhaps this experience was so traumatic that he doesn't even remember that he's dead, which is why he doesn't even try to communicate it to Freddy or even really reflect on it himself while alone. I think if he is a ghost, he doesn't really fully understand that himself. This could also imply why the real and true ending for this game has to be in defeating William Afton, aka Burn Trap. It could be that this is Gregory's unfinished business, and the ending we get if Vanny is redeemed with Vanessa, Freddy, and Gregory on the hill is actually symbolizing that they have all crossed over and now get to be together and at peace. After all, that whole like hill with the tree and everything, it definitely reminds me of the gravestones that we've seen before in FNAF, so to me it feels very like ghost vibes, in my opinion. Of course, one theory we've been discussing on Top 10 Gaming for a while since before the release of Security Breach is that Gregory could actually be Crying Child. If so, this also kind of fits with our ghost theory. I mean, sure, Crying Child could be an animatronic replacement child who was like created after the original Crying Child's death. Gregory could be a lifelike animatronic as such, but it's also possible that Gregory, if he is a ghost, is actually the spirit of Crying Child, because although we have theories about where that spirit is, we've never really like fully gotten any confirmation on those theories. I don't think. They're still kind of theories. Perhaps that is why he is so closely tied to the Pizzaplex, which was also built on top of the Freddy's location we manage in FNAF 6, Pizzeria Simulator, where it's believed all the souls were gathered as part of Henry's plot to finally defeat Afton and then set all his victims' souls free. And if you still aren't sure if Gregory is Crying Child or not, that's fine. I still say they have lots of similarities, but Gregory doesn't need to be Crying Child for him to also be a ghost. It just seems like another theoretical connection that supports the ghost theory that we're discussing here.
Intent possession. This theory comes from Sebi and stuff on the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza fandom page, and they seem to think that the daycare attendant is possessed, saying, quote, "Okay, so, as in the FNAF 3 bad ending, we see all the souls in the eyes of the animatronics with 2 lights in the golden Freddy head," a theory which I've already disproven since Crying Child, who is presumed to be the other soul, shouldn't have been introduced yet. This has turned into a theory about Golden Freddy having 2 spirits inside of them. Though now I wanted to bring up who else has 2 white eyes, the daycare attendant. Now those eyes don't necessarily glow, but they are 2 blank and empty white eyes, and there are 2 forms of this animatronic. 2 forms, 2 spirits. Now in Security Breach there is a new form to show that the animatronics are possessed, and it's glowing red eyes as a part of the blob. Afton is the excuse since his eyes are purple because obviously it's Afton. Now again, there is something that's part of the daycare attendant that shows his possession feature. The Moondrop animatronic has glowing red eyes." End quote. This leads Sebi to conclude that the daycare attendant is possessed by 2 different spirits. And while this certainly is interesting, I don't think that it would be the case. The daycare attendant doesn't actually have enough of a role in the game to be one of, if not the only, possessed animatronic in the game. And again, I've already disproven the 2-eye theory from FNAF 3's bad ending. Link to that video is in the icon. In at 9, the arcade conspiracy. This theory comes from Reddit user Averdict_AV on the game theory subreddit discussing Sundrop and their glitching arcade game. This is because I really like the daycare attendant Sundrop and the fact that he is not dangerous and lethal to Gregory, which seems not to be discussed much, but I might have a theory regarding that. My thought is that when we look at the Balloon Boy arcade in Sundrop's room, the Balloon World cabinet, I think it is important that, well, firstly, it's one of the few playable arcade cabinets in the game, but also features a very glitchy section and a glitchy Sundrop. Specifically, only Sundrop was glitched in that game, even though Moondrop and Sundrop are both present within the game. I think this is the reason why Sundrop was not hostile and lethal. I believe that the glitch or the hacks done by presumably Vanny or Gregory to some people that were meant for Sundrop were trapped in that arcade machine. There isn't a glitch Moondrop in the arcade because the glitch or the hack actually got to Moondrop, turning them into a dangerous animatronic. That was meant to turn Sundrop dangerous, but it didn't go through and somehow got stuck in the arcade. When we look at all the other animatronic specific arcade games, not Princess Quest, there is only Monty that is playable, but it does not feature any glitches at all. It just calls back to previous game locations. This is because I believe that the glitch got to Monty already. But if I want to interject here and throw in the fact that the arcade conspiracy note mentions that Chica has an arcade game that's glitching and so does Monty, maybe this theory has a little more juice to it. In at 8, name drop. Get it? Actually, wait, you won't get it yet. You will. Coming from Reddit user The Wizard Muss on the FNAF Theories Reddit page, quote, "I find it really interesting that the daycare attendant doesn't have a proper character name, especially given their large enough attractions to advertise with, and in this series most of the animatronics have a proper name unless they're a part of a large group, the Mini Renas, the Bitty Bats, etc. Music Man would have to be the exception to that until Security Breach, now a fair number of them, but I don't know, maybe there's supposed to be multiple daycare attendants? The Pizzaplex is big enough that the daycare would have a lot of kids, and one animatronic probably wouldn't be able to bounce around a group of 20 or so. The only thing that makes me question that is that the parent emails are in the singular when addressing the daycare attendant because they're only dealing with one. I'm pretty sure that Freddy also only refers to one attendant." End quote. And while the character is seemingly called Sundrop and Moondrop, those are also the names of candy that they're advertising. So it might be confusing, maybe they're not actually intended to be named those. But it's also interesting to think that no character actually calls them by those names. But Freddy does mention the names of the other animatronics, so maybe there are meant to be more than one, or that the situation is more complex than we realize, or dare I say the situation is mega complex. Get it? Mega Pizzaplex. In at 7, pain. At me making these lists. Is it possible that the daycare attendant actually feels physical pain when transforming? It seems unlikely, but still possible due to the seemingly agonizing screams we hear while Sun transforms into Moon during that cutscene. Fun fact, the animatronic doesn't actually switch. In that cutscene there are 2 different models, which is why the character falls behind the desk. The only time we actually see the model change between the 2 is in the Freddy and Friends cartoon. However, is it possible for animatronics to feel pain? It's unclear. I mean, we completely decimate 3 out of the 5 animatronics in the Pizzaplex and they seemingly feel no pain through it, fighting until the very end and then beyond. But Roxy is also programmed for emotional pain, at least on the surface level it appears to be like that. But does this mean that they could have programmed emotional pain and physical pain? We don't know. Maybe the daycare attendant did something wrong, so now switching to the moon form is painful. Or maybe when he's forcefully changed, it's painful. Or it could just be that Sun is just fighting to stay in control over Moon, but the change in lighting is just too powerful for him, and that's what that is. He's fighting. Ah! And at 6, Puppet 2.0. There is a theory that I've seen on TikTok. I can't remember who made it for the life of me, okay? I try and wipe all other exposure to FNAF out of my memory as fast as possible, especially when it's on TikTok. I don't want FNAF to invade my TikTok. However, this theory stuck with me, and it's the idea that the daycare attendant is a new form of the puppet animatronic first seen in FNAF 2, which is interesting and kind of plausible. I mean, we know that the puppet was meant to be a security bot, and the daycare attendant acts very much like a security guard until the lights go off. And when he kicks us out, he does call for security, and then every hour he roams the Pizzaplex like security, but there's still more to it than that. The Moondrop form of the daycare attendant also flies around on wires, much like a marionette would. Marionette being another word for puppet, but specifically a puppet on strings, which is something also often associated with the puppet from FNAF 2. I mean, how else could they jump from the prize counter to your office? They don't need the strings to move, but they both use the strings to get around quickly when they need to, which is also something that's pointed out on the villains fandom page for the daycare attendant. So maybe it's something that we should be considering. Like I guess we need a surrogate puppet after all, now that Charlotte's put to rest, don't we? No! We don't. Halfway through, in at number 5, the FNAF ARG. This was brought up in a recent MatPat FNAF theory, and people are starting to suggest that it's going to be involved in this DLC. The basic idea that the FNAF Fazbear Frights books were originally going to have an ARG that Scott ended up cutting out for whatever reason, and then released part of it in the Felix the Shark book 12. However, I'm here to tell you guys that it's not real, okay? Scott has said on multiple occasions that he doesn't want to cross the line between fact and fiction, and that he wants to keep the two worlds separate, probably because FNAF relates so closely to Chuck E. Cheese. And that's also why he wouldn't really make a real FNAF location, okay? He stuck to this so hard that he didn't even make a website for the indie game dev introduced in FNAF VR like he wanted to, because he thought that it would be too fuzzy for the line, okay? So, look. There is no FNAF ARG, okay? If a website is too much, there is no bigger quest here. Last time we thought this, there was a restaurant that got harassed, and a pizzeria owner who just so happened to be named Mike also got harassed. So please, don't go out searching. If there was an ARG, I'm sure Scott would have said something about it, okay? So don't harass anyone, just stick to the games and the game files. Crack open FNAF 3's mobile game if you want to see if there's the image there. Just leave the real world locations and people alone. And at 4, simulation. It's also worth mentioning that there are multiple instances on the poster that feel unfinished. Now, I don't know if this was because the poster was rushed, which has seemingly been a trend with FNAF recently, or because they're simply mistakes, but I wanted to point out in case it has bigger implications. Like when I mentioned the last time we talked about this, the floor at the bottom actually cuts off, but the rocks on top of the floor don't. Mostly because at this point the ground without brightening had mostly faded into black, but the rock was still kind of visible. However, even unbrightened, you can see the clear divide between the tile and just pure black. You can also see that on the left, the floor does the same. And this is very clear in the original poster, okay? I mean, like, there's even a glowing rock sitting at the border. Oh, it's like glowing because it has reflecting light on it, but it also kind of reminds me of when an item is important, so it's highlighted in the game even if it makes it unrealistic. But the most interesting part in my eyes is the tree on the far right. The one in the back next to the escalator. The bottom 2 sections of it are blank, like they're just filled in with a black outline and then solid brown color. Like the artist had finished the color blocking and then forgot to finish the tree despite doing the rest of that tree. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but if it is, then could this be pointing to the entire thing being a simulation? Which would then bring up the question of how and who. Like maybe this is what Vanny is seeing in her head while Glitchtrap was taken over, so that she's still like the good guy in her head, so she's not fighting back against Glitchtrap's control. Or maybe it's Gregory still caught in his dream that started in 1983. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Prisoner. Now time to get to some theories about our blondie in the middle. Who is she? I made it a point last time to mention that she looked an awful lot like the middle silhouette of the 9 children who ended up going missing due to Vanny, and I still stand by that point. So the most realistic answer I have is that the missing children weren't actually dead, but they were rather trapped inside the building somewhere. Much like how Vanny in the very first trailer for the game said, "Gregory, your friends are here with me."
Gregory, your friends are worried about you. They're here with me. Please come out.
So clearly, Gregory must have known these children, right? Which explains why he came to the Pizzaplex in the first place, but it doesn't explain how he never mentions them. Either way, this is a very real possibility that this blonde girl is just a missing child who, thanks to the collapse of the Pizzaplex, managed to escape containment. But ultimately, in at number 2, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, this one is a bit wild, but hear me out. I also mentioned last time how both of these kids look like Aftons. Gregory is very clearly meant to at least be an allegory for crying child, okay? The stripes on the shirt, the age, the relationship with Freddy, it was right there in our faces. Whether you believe he is a robot or not, he is at least meant to represent crying child. And now, look at this girl. While she may be in black and white, she is still very clearly blonde. She has pigtails like Baby does, and we all know who Elizabeth ends up possessing. She's wearing a skirt exactly like Elizabeth was wearing in the one time we see her in Sister Location. I mean, if crying child's 2 stripes are enough for a comparison, I think this is more than enough. And then, look at her shoes. The lights are the only thing that has color on them, which is very clearly meant to have our attention. And then those lights are purple and red. Purple very clearly representing William Afton, and while last time I said that the red could be Vanny, Baby is absolutely covered in red. From the clothes to her hair, red is all over that animatronic. Or it could be that this girl is evil, just like how Elizabeth always wants to impress her father. Just saying. It's not the craziest thing this series would have done. Okay, it would have been, okay, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Or again, they could have just been taken because they look like the kids. And finally, in at number 1, time travel. This one is crazy, I will admit, and it's most definitely not the case, but FNAF has already established time travel as possible in the very first Fazbear Frights book called Into the Pit. Remember that one? Where Oswald ends up jumping into a ball pit and somehow leaving 2011 and appearing in 1985 to witness the missing children's incident? Yeah, that story wasn't written for no reason. And where do we see the first ball pit that wasn't in a pizzeria that was simply meant to lure animatronics around? Oh, would you look at that? The Mega Pizzaplex. I'm just saying that time travel has already been established, and considering how sketchy Gregory is, I wouldn't put it past him from being from the future or something. There are actually 2 key indicators that point in this direction, at least in my mind. The therapy disc where the therapist calls client 46 out on the lies about their home life, and the fact that when he leaves the Pizzaplex in the worst ending, he sleeps in a cardboard box. The therapist in the tape says that 46, which I'm still certain is Gregory, has a great home life, but what they told their previous therapist was a lie. But if that is the case and his home life is great, despite saying his parents and him suffered some form of tragedy, how is it that he sleeps in a cardboard box? Like, his home life is great, but he sleeps in a box. Because it hasn't happened yet. The tragedy where he most likely loses his parents hasn't happened as of when the game takes place, which would mean that this girl could be Gregory's sister who came back to save him when he didn't return. Or he could be lying and instead using the name of someone he knows is a missing child in the future, which is why he can't go home. Or why the therapist describes him as writing down his past as if it was a story. Because it is a story, just not his. Firstly, we have to establish whether this would be something new, or if it would have been this way since the start. And there are a few indicators that might surprise you. In my latest playthrough, the Security Breach But It's Ruined by Mods video that released on Saturday, April 2nd on this channel, I made a note to point out that Freddy doesn't really seem to care when you get locked inside the Pizzaplex. He also seemed to care more about the fact that you got a crappy Mr. Hippo magnet as your free gift, and sounds more disappointed about that than the whole locked in and might get killed by a serial killer thing. Which begs the question, is he really all that disappointed? Obviously, if he was blatantly evil, he would have just turned us over to Vanessa, but if he was really crafty, he would gain our trust first. After all, he should have Glitch Trap's code inside him, right? Well, let's look at what he does before the doors close. He sends us to get a pass in order to free him from his green room, and then everything seems to go well. But then, for some random reason, without ever mentioning this before, he tells us that he senses we are broken and that he needs to bring us to medical so that we can get fixed up or something like that. Whether this was meant to be a nod to Crying Child or not doesn't matter in this case, okay? The point here is that it doesn't actually do anything. We get our run-in with Vanessa, that later gets turned into a TikTok meme, but other than that, we stay the same. We don't get healed, we don't get a band-aid, because we could have had it from the start. We get in that booth, instantly turn around, and move the curtain to peep outside and watch that scene. After that, Freddy doesn't mention how we're still broken, and I don't know about you, but me standing in a booth isn't really gonna heal me, okay? It seems odd if you ask me, especially since now with that little pit stop, even if you go full steam ahead making no stops, sprinting the whole time, you can't make it out of the doors. That one little interaction is the 30 seconds that we needed in order to escape out the front doors, but thanks to Freddy, now we don't make it. And you can't use his programming as an excuse for this either, because if we want to use programming as evidence, this man was supposed to be controlled by Afton's virus, and the glitching out should have messed him up. Plus, his coding isn't designed to scan children that are literally inside his body. If he picked up on the injury when Gregory was outside of his stomach for the first time and he was scanning us, why not take him to medical instantly, or as soon as you got out of the green room? And again, why make it seem like your coding is letting you scan a kid that's inside you, when nobody should be in there? Unless that's the point. What if Afton's virus did grab a hold of Freddy and just made everything seem like it was fine? Having an animatronic protect you and gaining the kid's trust is a lot better than just nabbing him out of nowhere. Plus, I mean, there would have been plenty of times this kid could have been gotten, particularly when Freddy gets grabbed by the Moondrop animatronic right outside of Parts and Service. You're telling me that Moondrop, the daycare attendant, told Vanessa that Freddy was in the Parts and Service room, but didn't mention that we were in the recharge station right next to Parts and Service? I mean, he knew, like he waved at us while taking Freddy away. But Vanessa knows that just grabbing Gregory won't accomplish Afton's true goal. So instead, what do? They stage a fake interrogation where Freddy once again looks like the good guy, and then she leaves through the most inconvenient way for her possible. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row when she could easily come our way and then head to the main atrium? That's where Gregory was. That's where all the animatronics have been spotting him. And then, after Vanessa leaves Freddy in Parts and Service so that his casing can be put on a new endo after corporate gives the go-ahead, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around Rockstar Row. Like, who would have repaired him if not Gregory? There is literally no other living human in the Pizzaplex at this point, and the whole containment cylinder thing is so that it protects humans on the outside. Why is Vanessa so nonchalant about Freddy walking around? It was something that confused me in my first playthrough. I figured that Vanessa would just pull us out of Freddy if we got too close, but no. And a reasonable explanation to that is that she isn't sus because she knows the plan. And also, it's worth noting that Afton has spent all this time in a burnt down Pizzaplex that also contained his daughter, who has pulled this exact same scheme on us prior to this game, okay? So he could have picked up on it from her, either while they were burning, while she was trying to impress him, or maybe if she is controlling the blob and it's not actually Funtime Freddy. Just saying. And maybe I'm wrong about that, okay? It's entirely possible. I mean, after all of this, it is a FNAF game, right? Where not everything makes sense for the sake of the story that Scott wants to tell. But what about the post-game? What about after we supposedly end Afton? What then? Is Freddy on the up and up? Or is there enough of Afton in there for us to be in danger? Well, it's actually a pretty interesting idea, since there is the distinct possibility that Afton is now controlling Freddy. Sure, when we haven't defeated Afton's body and he ends up possessing Freddy, we get killed instantly and Freddy gets purple eyes. However, in the actual ending to this boss fight, we supposedly stop Burn Trap. But then, the area around us starts collapsing. What if Afton was using Freddy as a means of escape when he knew that his situation was dire? I mean, honestly, if we think about this, Afton was downloading his consciousness wirelessly into Glamrock Freddy while we were fighting him. That was the whole point of the fight. But would it really reset to 0 once he stops and tries again? Or would it just be like pausing a download? Honestly, with the kind of buffoonery in this series, I don't think we can discount the possibility that Afton was simply just putting a pause on the download in an effort to eventually still take over Freddy and potentially spend time with his robot son. Or maybe just escape into the world once more. But like, seriously, he was transferring his consciousness into Glamrock Freddy by putting his hand on a monitor. And not even a monitor, like a dinosaur monitor at that. I don't think that we can like just go like, oh no, he's not in Freddy, he's dead, he's gone forever. That's no. If he can transfer his brain from an animatronic into another animatronic through touching a computer screen where he can see the guy, that's... No. If you think that Afton's done, you have not been paying attention to this series at all. And if you think that Glamrock Freddy is safe, again, you don't know the series in the slightest. I hate that I was right about Freddy, because eventually it's gonna be revealed that he's evil, I know it. In a 10, save him. Now, there is a very clear connection between the Ruin poster and the Save Them minigame from FNAF 2. The text on the screen, at least to me, indicates that what we will have to do is save Gregory from whatever situation that he's in, with Freddy. Since we know that eventually he does make it to that hill that he sits on in the true ending, in the Princess Quest ending. However, it could be possible that that scene, in this case, is just a dream, since it's more realistic than the other endings. That could also just be because it's the true ending and it's canon, but it's currently unclear. Obviously, if it's real, we will end up being successful, but it's possible that our character, whoever she is, will die in the process. I could also be drawing weird connections between things that aren't really linked, but that's always possible when theory crafting, at literally any point, so... In at 9, Robot Gregory. This poster, in my eyes, also helps prove further that Gregory is in fact a robot, since after all we get confirmation that Vanny messes up the cameras, as you can see from the 2 screens that have Vanny on them. They're both glitching out. This is further supported by our last point, because how would Gregory be able to add a help me sign to a screen without being able to access the cameras? Nowhere on our fast watch does it say that we can add text, and Freddy clearly doesn't have the ability since he would have used it during the section where we have to open the doors for him so that we can then be a sussy baka and vent, instead of just, you know, standing there and waving. He could have had text flashing up on screen so that we can see him easily. Multiple people I watched play this had difficulty with this section, okay? Freddy just flashing some text on screen saying I'm here, especially when the player takes a while, would have established that he had this power, but they didn't. So unless they want to somehow retcon that in, it has to be that Gregory's controlling it. Most likely because he's a robot and he can just, like, tap into the cameras. And it ain't no more Freddy. There is also a possibility that Freddy is destroyed, or that he won't be in this DLC at all thanks to the statue we see on the poster. This poster could be an indication of what happened to Freddy after the pizza plexus collapse. I mean, after all, the collapse did destroy Chica, right? So why couldn't it have destroyed Freddy too? Yes, he ends up on the hill with Gregory, but like I said, that could be a dream or a heaven of sorts, or it could be years after the actual ending of the game. We can't really be certain. Or at the very least, the game could be omitting Freddy and he won't make an appearance for whatever reason, hence why the statue is destroyed. I mean, like, look at it. This thing is in pieces, but why? There isn't much rubble around it, and the escalator walls are way less damaged than this, so why would the statue have been so heavily damaged if there was nothing that actually hit it? Seems a bit sus if you ask me. And it's 7 1 year later. With the DLC not releasing until 2023, the question remains of when in the timeline it will take place. Yes, it will take place after the true ending for Security Breach, but how long after the true ending is the question. See, with the state of the animatronics, it seems that it could be later on, and the release date being 2 years after the release of the original game means that it could be linear in the timeline sense, so it could also take place 2 years after the ending. But that would then bring on the question of why is Gregory back there if it's a year or 2 later? But then we also have to ask who is this girl and where they came from if we're really going to know this answer. So while there are theories, this one specifically coming from Amanda because of the release date, we still don't know for sure until we have some more information. Time to wait another 6 months before another teaser. And at 6, Chica Graffiti. While zooming in on Chica, like I always do, I did notice that her torso seems to have traces of red on it. Now, what this is in reality is definitely unclear, but it could be graffiti, indicating that this could be later on in the timeline. She could have been decommissioned for a while after being revived for whatever purpose, and maybe some kids got to her and decided to spray paint her. Or, more likely, it's actually pizza sauce. See, brightening the image while basic FNAF at this point is also still helpful, and I used it in the last Ruins video. However, while the red is evident on the normal poster, by brightening you can actually see that there is yellow dripping from Chica's face. And unless Chica started listening to Bear Grylls in order to survive the collapse of the Pizzaplex, I'm pretty sure that it's melted cheese dripping from her mouth, which would also explain the red in tandem. I mean, it could be her beak, but like, we were trying to explain the red, so cheese makes sense. Like I said, it would mean that the red stuff would then be pizza sauce and potentially pepperoni or some other form of meat that the Pizzaplex kitchen would add on pizza. But it could also be blood. Not sure from who, but maybe Chica saved Vanny's life or something. Also, I was at Niagara Comic-Con 2 days ago, and there was a girl dressed as Chica. Didn't know who I was. It was kind of offensive. It was really humbling. Halfway through into number 5, Half Infected. This theory comes to us from Love Nathan Carr on the Game Theory subreddit and proposes an idea as to how just the Moondrop side of the daycare attendant got infected with the Afton virus. Here's a quote from their post. Sundrop seems to be the only one that has no history from what I've seen with the virus. As shown in what behavior he does partake in, he appears to cry when we go missing, he cleans up the place, he tries to entertain us, and he tries to keep us out of trouble. He does not partake in attempting to kill or capture us like the others. The reason behind this is Sundrop and Moondrop are two entities in one body. They have different coding. So let's say the story before the virus came to all the animatronics is that the mall is dark for the entire night because Moondrop is not a problem. He doesn't try to hurt anyone. But then Vanny shows up, and since the animatronics were most likely infected at night, it would make a decent amount of sense. The two sides have different functions and would therefore require separate programming, at least if they are two halves of one whole animatronic. And there's not multiple of them like we discussed earlier. And at 4, Look Out. Now this is a separate theory that I found within the Love Nathan Carr post on the Game Theory subreddit that I wanted to address separately. So, quote from later on in that same post, actually it's right after I ended the last quote. The night the virus came, Moondrop was infected with the other animatronics, leaving them with a lust to kill or kidnap. Sundrop figures this out, and at some point he brings it up to the proper authorities. So they make the daycare and the Pizzaplex constantly lit to stop Moondrop. This is where Sundrop gets scared of the lights turning off, as people will get hurt if it happens, end quote. So this user seems to be suggesting that Sundrop knows what Moondrop is doing and tries to stop it from happening, which could explain why he's fighting to stay in control when the lights go out. I don't know, it's certainly an interesting concept, but it relies more on conjecture and assumption rather than evidence, so I'm gonna have to say objection, hearsay on that one. And at 3, The Light. Coming from user ChickNugs on Twitter, they believe that Gregory would actually have been safer with Sundrop in the daycare rather than with Freddy. Quote, unpopular opinion, Gregory was perfectly safe and okay to stay with Sun until 6 AM. Sun most likely would have protected him against anyone else, although Freddy was more caring and thoughtful of what Gregory desired than Sun. Yet it would have been annoying to stay with Sun and be forced to play, but it was undeniably the safest option, apart from staying trapped in Freddy's chest cavity and doing until 6 AM as Freddy recharged the entire time. And which, you know what, it's actually a fairly valid point. I'd still say that being in Freddy's green room and sleeping through the night was the best option, since Vanessa never thought to look in there, only figuring out that they were working together after hearing the Fazwatch call out in Freddy's voice. However, this makes another Twitter user going by the name Dante Loyal suggest that the whole he'd be safe with Sundrop thing is the reason the lights get turned off in the first place, and that Vanny was probably the one to do it so that Gregory wouldn't end up being safe. But ultimately, in at number 2, multiple daycare attendants. Now, we kind of touched on this earlier, but there's actually evidence in the game that can kind of help us. Now, we only see one daycare attendant at a time, but there is the possibility that there are multiple within the Pizzaplex. One indication to this possibility is actually within the daycare itself. See, if Gregory tries to return to the daycare after being thrown out, the daycare attendant, as Sundrop, will appear in the slide and throw him out once again. However, the other animatronics will not come if this happens. Interestingly enough though, this can still happen even when Moon is the dominant personality and running around the Pizzaplex, meaning that even if the Moon animatronic is right behind you at the top of the hour, you can still try and get into the daycare and be rejected by Sun, suggesting that there are more than one of this character. But the game is imperfect and there are glitches galore, so we cannot confirm this as an impossibility or a confirmation. So looks like, as per usual in the FNAF series, all we have is idle speculation and propositions rather than any actual solid statements. Wonderful. It's like the FNAF series has IBS with its lore. And finally, in at number 1, aw man. A customer complaint in one of the lore duffel bags that you can find throughout the Pizzaplex has an angry parent revealing that their child, who previously had no sleep-related issues, has begun refusing to sleep with the lights off and started wetting the bed after being left in the daycare. It is implied that said child has been traumatized by the daycare attendant's moon form. But what could this thing have done to traumatize this kid if they were within the confines of the daycare? Sure, when we get the lights off, we get some psycho dude trying to kill us, but when it's an actual daycare session, why is it so traumatizing? Well, that's where the name and number comes in. Yeah, you see, in the daycare attendant mods video, I mentioned multiple times how this dude gives me Chris Hansen conversation Needin' vibes. And the easiest way to say this without YouTube getting mad is by saying creeper. Aw man, that's right, he's a creeper. I think we all know where I'm going with this. I mean, Sun seriously grabs you and then forces you to play with him, and if you try to leave, he will pick you up and put you right back in your place during the first part of this boss battle. So, I mean, like, if this dude was going around making kids feel uncomfortable and then ruining their innocence, I would expect it. So, yeah, don't put your kids in the FNAF daycare. Firstly, let's go over a theory that I've been seeing that I wanted to stop in its tracks. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen because this video is probably gonna get like 6,000 views max, but either way, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. Susie has been dead for a long time once the game takes place, being dead for over 50 years or so. So there is literally no possible way that this girl could be Susie. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released her spirit in the Happiest Day minigame, and she has only possessed Chica as far as we've known. Some assume that the Happiest Day minigame takes place at the end of the timeline. However, I don't think that's true, considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that when FNAF 3 is over we get the good ending. To me, that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place in FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria FNAF 6 does not have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released because, well, they had already been dealt with. So about this girl, let's go over some evidence about what we see on the poster. Firstly, there is her blonde hair. We know that it's blonde thanks to the rim lighting on the character being blonde at her hair, and while yes, it may seem stupid, I think that the general consensus is that this girl is blonde. While rim lighting is the color of the light that it is instead of the color of the person, it also isn't going to be yellow on a darker surface. So this means that her hair is not black, eliminating Cassidy from the race. So this is not the spirit that was possessing Golden Freddy, or who a good amount of people consider the one you should not have killed, aka the Vengeful Spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. The girl in the middle is also wearing a jacket and what appears to be a denim skirt, fingerless gloves, white socks, and sneakers that light up Skechers style. Hashtag not sponsored, but like Skechers, hit me up, we can probably work something out. Now this may not be out of the ordinary to any of you, but this instantly reminded me of someone from a previous game. As I did mention this in another video, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, I get that she's been dead for longer than Susie, but just hear me out, okay? See, when we were playing Sister Location, we ended up getting the cutscene where Elizabeth is grabbed and killed by Baby, turning Baby's eye color from blue to green. This outfit that this mysterious girl is wearing is nearly identical to the one that Elizabeth was wearing in that minigame, aside from the light up shoes that wouldn't be available for another decade by real world standards. However, in FNAF in 1983, they also had discs that emitted sounds that altered the appearance of things in your brain. So a couple of light up shoes 10 years early doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. The skirt is also identical to the skirt that Elizabeth wears in that cutscene, and the jacket could easily be covering up a similar styled shirt, which could be pushing the idea that Gregory having two stripes on his shirt is definitely important. But I want to talk about the color. You see, there is no real color on this girl. Bumping up the saturation, brightness, or vibrance actually shows that this girl is drawn in black and white. Have you ever heard of the saying, lack of evidence is sometimes itself evidence? Like maybe you're dealing with a professional killer, or that these thieves are overly cautious. Well, I think that this is a similar situation. Think about it. Why would they draw this girl in black and white? I mean, yeah, sure, she's backlit, but being backlit doesn't make you grayscale. This is an indication that the color of this girl's clothing can possibly mean something. Maybe Scott thought that he was too subtle with Gregory, only putting 2 stripes on his shirt, so this time he went for the full outfit including color. Speaking of color, there's also the matter of her shoes, the only part of her that isn't rimlet that has color. The color of her lights being purple and red. Purple obviously being a nod to William Afton, aka the Purple Guy, a character so synonymous with purple that I can't wear my favorite shirt on this channel now without being called a serial killer. And red, while misleading, actually does tie back to Elizabeth Afton in the form of Baby. Her entire outfit was red, including her bright red hair, and I mean, like, it seems fairly reasonable to assume that this girl has at least a connection to the Afton family, although there is another explanation for the red on her shoes. Give me a minute. Given that the other 2 humans on this screen, Vanny and Gregory, are also connected to the Aftons, we can guess that this is the case with the blonde girl as well. However, I don't think that the girl herself is Elizabeth. Here's the wow moment, alright? I think that this girl is possessed by Elizabeth. Yeah, I know, right? Hear me out. I know I said that that's not possible with Susie, but that's because we freed her, alright? There are 7 faces on the Blob, the secret antagonist of Security Breach. 4 of them have lit red eyes, and 2 of them don't. The 4 that do are Naked Endo, FNAF 1 Bonnie, FNAF 1 Chica, and Mangle, all of which are somehow present in some form or another in the Pizzaplex. Mangle is Roxy, Bonnie was Bonnie, Chica was Chica, and we fight multiple Endos on multiple occasions. The 2 that aren't present, however, don't have their eyes lit up, Baby and the puppet. But we know that fire doesn't do anything to Remnant, clearly. I mean, Afton has burned, what, 3 times now, and none have stuck? And in another video, we determined that the spirits can only be freed when they get their unfinished business resolved, like the missing children in Happiest Day. Baby also doesn't seem too happy about burning in FNAF 6. She in fact says that she wants to make her daddy proud, and dying to fire would really do the opposite considering how many he's survived. So, much like we suspect Michael could have, Elizabeth could have swapped bodies as well, into one of the missing children that Vanny took. Hell, that could have been why Vanny took them in the first place. Afton wanted his daughter to have a vessel, hence why this one looks so much like Elizabeth's original body. This also explains why there is red on her shoes, because it's meant to represent the glowing red eyes that would be in the animatronic head. Remember, it's damn hard to kill an Afton for good, and in the books, Baby is really the one orchestrating everything, at least when it comes to the Afton amalgamation. Especially since this girl is facing away, her eyes could also be green, and I have a feeling that throughout the game we will see her eyes either flip-flop or start off blue and become green or something like that. Or, what I think would be the coolest way to do this would be having her eyes green normally, like if we see it in like a camera or something, but be blue in a mirror. So, here's how I think the story went. After the FNAF 6 fire, William gets a hold of Vanny in order to get his body back. He creates, through the company, a new location on top of the old one to hide his deeds, and then he sets himself free. In the process, though, he notices that his daughter's spirit is also stuck. Since this is the first time they've been together since he put her in the basement of sister location, he decides to help her out, and causes Vanny to start abducting kids who look like his in an effort to rebuild his former family. Given that his youngest son is either still possessing him or now loose to the elements as well, the blonde girl is then kidnapped and Elizabeth finds her suitable host, so she's possessed. And now she follows Vanessa around in an effort to keep an eye on her and remind her that Afton is always watching. She starts manipulating her through encoded chats and messages, and hacks the FNAF AR animatronics to cause them to malfunction, and gets Vanessa promoted to security guard to keep an even closer eye on her. As a part of her observations, she starts therapy just like Vanessa does, and despite her telling the truth about her family history, it doesn't line up with the girl that she's possessed. Hence the one therapist calling out Client 46 for it, and her explanation about what happened to her family seeming to lack emotion, since after all, she watched it happen as Baby instead of experiencing it as an actual child. After the collapse, she is either brought back by Afton requesting help with himself, or possibly also to help secure the vessel for Crying Child, who escaped along with a Michael-possessed glam rock Freddy. To me, this seems like a game about reuniting with lost brothers, lost hope, but most of all, reuniting a family. the Afton family. After all, we have all the characters now. The misguided father whose misdeeds cost him everything, his loyal daughter who wants to see her family back, the mother who now agrees and is a part of the father's plan, even if unwillingly so, and the sons, one too scared to do anything, and the older brother who helps him beat the circle that their father created, who rights their wrongs and makes up for their family's sins. What do you think? I feel like I'm pretty spot on with this one and that this could be a great launching point for the next part of the series, but let me know what you think down below. While I may have had prior bias to the idea that crying child is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, I really do want to get to the bottom of this, genuinely. So when researching for Cassidy, I was keeping an open mind and using every source that I could. Multiple things stuck out to me as being commonly referred to as evidence for Cassidy. The final scene of Ultimate Custom Night where Golden Freddy is twitching after you beat 50-20 mode. The survival logbook, which seemingly contains conversations between crying child and Cassidy. The voice lines you can hear behind the mediocre melodies sound like a girl, like the ones that play slightly after the main mediocre melodies ones. And William actually killed Cassidy directly, as far as we can tell, whereas Michael put crying child in Fredbear's mouth. And these are some good points, and not something to discount. These are also the points that made me believe that Cassidy was the one you should not have killed originally as well. There's also the point that when the animatronics refer to the character as he, they're simply referring to the Golden Freddy animatronic, since Golden Freddy is a male character, as well as Cassidy's name containing the Cass prefix, which means curly-haired in Gaelic, and the character of Andrew, who represents the vengeful spirit in the Fazbear Fright story The Man in Room 1280, has curly black hair. There's also the two-eye theory from FNAF 3. The two-eye theory states that in the FNAF 3 bad ending, there are two eyes lit up in the head and the back, which we assume to be Golden Freddy to show that there are two souls inside the animatronic. I do have rebuttals for crying child points as well, alright, so don't worry, but I feel like it's important to not only talk about the evidence, but also give countering points to it as well. These are mostly coming from my brain, but after over 350 FNAF videos on my own, I feel like I am more than qualified to discuss this. The Golden Freddy final scene in Ultimate Custom Night can easily be explained away if you do believe the two souls theory, since if it was crying child in the suit as well, this would make sense. It could also be due to the fact that he was put in a coma by the Fredbear animatronic, which is a golden bear like Golden Freddy. The he pronoun being used to describe the vengeful spirit is a really hit to the Cassidy theory as well, since why would they be describing the gender of an animatronic when they're talking about the kid that died? Especially when, thanks to the mediocre melodies, we know that these animatronics are just saying the things that they're made to say by the one you should not have killed, meaning the spirit is really the one using these pronouns, so why wouldn't they use their own and instead use the animatronics? The voice lines sound like a girl because, well, they're voiced by a girl. The casting call on voices.com was very general and said that the actress could lean towards either a male or a female. The survival logbook having two spirits doesn't really have anything to do with Cassidy being a vengeful spirit, and the Cass prefix, while yes meaning curly-haired in Gaelic, seems to me like a bit of a stretch. The whole name of Cassidy is Irish in origin and means the clever one. The origin of this name is also 65% Irish and only 5% Gaelic, meaning if we want to go off meaning, we should be going with the majority, which would be the clever one, which really doesn't do anything to help this theory. And the two-eye theory has been debunked by us in the past in its own video and also on my Instagram in a reel. However, I'll go over it here. In an interview with Doco, Scott confirmed that while making FNAF 3, it was intended to be the finale, that there was no intended next game, meaning that at that point there were no other characters that could possess Golden Freddy. The lights being on in both eyes is simply because the light is bouncing off the inside of the head, and to show us that it actually is an animatronic head that was supposed to be Freddy, since if it was only one eye it could also kind of look like Bonnie. Or hell, if it's only one eye we would have thought that it was another Foxy. Now there is a lot more evidence for crying child in my opinion, okay? Whenever I asked others who thought that it was Cassidy why they thought it was Cassidy instead, they all ended up giving me the same points. That Cassidy was killed directly, the two souls theory, and the gender confusion of the animatronic. Typically, nothing additional was added, okay? I'm sorry, it's just how it went. So now let's go over some of the evidence I gathered for crying child's case. Cassidy was released in the Happiest Day minigame in FNAF 3, hence why the original animatronics don't appear in FNAF 6 when Henry is trying to put everything involving Fazbear Entertainment to rest. If Cassidy is at rest as well, she cannot be possessing William. The spirit possessing William also, from what we've seen in the games, cannot be possessing both him and the Golden Freddy animatronic. If he can possess possess multiple things, then the two souls theory helps explain that as well, despite two souls and multiple possessions coming out of seemingly nowhere as far as the games are concerned. As I said, the casting call also said whoever got the part could lean towards a male or a female voice. And considering how Tabitha Skanes, the actress who got the part, is female, it would make sense for her to lean towards a female voice. It's also worth noting that most prepubescent male characters have female voice actors. Danny Phantom, Timmy Turner, Ash Ketchum, all these characters have female voice actors because they're young, so the same would be the case for Crying Child. The appearance of the nightmare animatronics in FNAF 4 as well also seems to be impossible unless the one creating that situation, the Vengeful Spirit, had seen them before. And since FNAF 4 was a dream, as confirmed by Ultimate Custom Night in lines like "This is a nightmare you won't wake from," Crying Child is the only one to have seen these animatronics. Crying Child also dies in a hospital after suffering through the agony of his coma nightmare, which would give him the power to latch onto something nearby, which would have most likely been his father. There's also weaker evidence like the fact that the image used for the Vengeful Spirit is just a blown out image of Scott's son, which could be a parallel to William's son. Andrew from the Man in Room 1280 is also a male, and while yes, Michael put Crying Child's head into the robot, William was the one who made the robot and also made it powerful enough to crush a skull, whereas a normal animatronic would be unable to do so, which is what Michael assumed would happen. He didn't think that it was going to kill his brother. Something that MapHat also agrees with, if, like some commenters have said, they only care about what he says and not the actual evidence. And while there is more evidence for Crying Child, there are also some things that don't have clean answers. The same is true for Cassidy. Cassidy might not have been released in the Happiest Day minigame, despite it seemingly being the case. The Nightmare animatronics also do appear in FNAF VR, which could have been due to the scanning of the hard drive that created Glitch Trap, who had seen the nightmares at this point, but it doesn't explain the fact that Michael drew Nightmare Fredbear in the survival logbook, unless this is something that he drew beforehand and then showed to Crying Child, hence why they showed up in his dreams, but that involves assumptions that I'm just not comfortable making. Crying Child does die in a hospital. However, while we haven't really seen proof that you can possess something far away in the games, we also technically haven't seen proof that says you can't. In my personal opinion, the lack of evidence is in and of itself evidence against that, but I guess I can see why others wouldn't be so quick to accept that. The same idea with possessing multiple things. The whole image being of Scott's son thing is kind of weak, but considering that the FNAF 4 home was also decorated with images of his family, I'd actually like to think that this is more important than we realize. Because sure, using his own assets is cheaper than buying them, but this seems very deliberate. If the images in the FNAF 4 home were supposed to be of William and his family, and they were of Scott's family, and then Scott's son is used for something else, yeah. But people will hone in on how that is circumstantial. The biggest rebuttal for Crying Child, however, is that William didn't kill him, Michael did. And since Crying Child is William's son, he wouldn't want to torture his dad. And while this can be true, we have to remember that Crying Child is again also a child, who most likely saw his sister get scooped by Baby, who got scared when he saw his father putting a worker into the Fredbear suit, and one of Scott's hints from that live stream oh so long ago was what is seen in shadows is often misunderstood in the mind of a child. Even without seeing William give the superpower he needed to the animatronic in order to make it a killbot, Crying Child knows that William is making killbots. He knows that he made Baby, and he knows that William made Fredbear. So getting killed by the animatronic wouldn't necessarily be Michael's fault, it would be William's. Much like how Elizabeth's death was his fault as well. And being family doesn't mean that you can't dislike or even hate those people, okay? Being related to you doesn't automatically give people a free pass for doing horrific acts. If my father was a serial killer who killed my little sister, and then killed me using overpowered animatronics, you best believe I'm coming back with a vengeance. And also, just one final point in general, in that interview with Daco that is still available on Daco's channel, Scott said that FNAF 3 was intended to be the final game. This question is presented 21 minutes into the video if you want to actually look at the timecode, when asked about which ending of FNAF 3 is canon. However, Scott also refuses to answer that question, because he knows how passionate the community gets, and cites the argument over Mangle's gender as a reason why he won't answer it. He says that it's complicated. And to me, this sounds like it's because what people generally understand in this series would be countered by which ending is canon. The good ending would have released Cassidy's soul, which would in turn make it impossible for her to be the vengeful spirit, since that minigame was in fact not Crying Child, okay? He hadn't been introduced yet. And according to a recent community poll, which actually inspired this video, the generally accepted idea is that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit. So if he had countered that, everyone would have all been up in a tizzy, okay? This was also after Ultimate Custom Night had been released, so yeah.